is a complex structure combining PR, brand messaging, product market fit. If you don't know product market fit, I can cover this later, but basically you've got to make sure that the people you're talking to will resonate with the product that you're selling or the service that you're selling. Marketing, in my opinion, is actually number one thing. It's understanding who your customer is. Now, often in business build, you'll see businesses focus on niches to start with. Now, it doesn't have to stay in that niche, but it's a great place to start. So Facebook, for example, it started off in universities. And by connecting people in universities, of course, now it became connected to everybody all over the world. But they understood their customer. They knew what that customer was looking for. And in the early days of Facebook, they put a feature on there called single or available. I can't remember the exact terminology, but they basically created a feature that let you know if that person was in a relationship or not. And that was designed to help the university students understand the dynamics between their fellow university students. And so they knew their market audience and they then marketed that feature. People would then go around saying, did you see Sarah? She's suddenly single. And that would be the marketing for their product. They built a tool in the platform that became what people spoke about, that created the marketing for you. And in my opinion, that's the holy grail of marketing. And this brings me on to point 2. I call this the staircase philosophy. So the best way for me to teach you this is to tell you what I have recently done. So weirdly, a few months ago, a staircase came up for sale in London. It's the first time a staircase had ever been for sale in London. It's ridiculous. And I heard it on the news that this staircase was for sale. And I told my brain instantly, we're going to buy it. Now, I didn't have an exact plan of what I was going to do with the staircase, but what I knew was that staircase symbolized something for my business, which was step by step, you can get anywhere you want. But also, I knew I could newsjack. That staircase was a sensation. People didn't know why someone was selling a staircase. And 2 days after hearing it on the news, I owned it. I spent £26,000 buying it at auction, and then we did a couple of clever things that hopefully symbolize how marketing works. First up, as soon as we bought the staircase, the news channels that had reported it was for sale jumped on us. I knew they would. And they wanted to know why we had bought a staircase. And that gave us an opportunity to get on the front page of the New York Times, on the front page of the BBC, and every single newspaper around the world. Millions of US dollars worth of coverage for our platform because we bought a staircase. It doesn't seem relevant, but doing these wild things, these crazy things, can actually make a huge difference. One of the things that I always loved in marketing was when flash mobs were a thing. And what happened was suddenly you get a whole shopping mall, people would start dancing, everyone would wonder what it was, right? That is brilliant marketing. Now, it might not sell your product exactly in that exact moment, but over time, it allows you to have reach and expansion and uniqueness to you that will help you stand out, because that's what it's about. It's about standing out. So by buying the staircase, we then evolved it. We got all this PR, millions of dollars worth of free PR for a staircase. Then we put a doorbell at the bottom of that staircase, and we said, if you've got a dream, press a button. We'll then upload your dream to our 4 million following and get you free exposure. Well, that was what the press needed to do a follow-up story on it. Once you bought the staircase, what did you do with it? And they wrote all about that. But also, we built a whole new way of helping people on the back of a staircase that was for sale. I knew it symbolized helping people step by step. And then the final step in marketing, we all need partners. Marketing isn't about promoting something on your own. We then want to get a partner like Ring Doorbell or Amazon, who own Ring Doorbell, on board to sponsor the doorbell, to sponsor the staircase, to help us reach even more people. And then suddenly they pay for our marketing. And so marketing isn't a standalone thing. Marketing isn't a non-living organic product. You have to see it as living. You have to see it as evolving, and you have to see it as something that you do that pushes the envelope. Now, marketing is connected to sales. If you have a sales team, in a way, when they ring someone up, how they speak to someone, how they treat someone, that is also marketing. That's brand marketing. However that person receives your phone call, receives your interaction with them will affect your brand. And that is marketing. Nike, for example, how do they do marketing? Well, they endorse the very best athletes in the world. Of course, in some cases, they make shoes with those very successful athletes. They are lining themselves up with these people that are incredibly successful. What does Apple do? Apple links to creative people. So therefore, everybody wants to have some sort of creativity in their life, beauty in their life. So they buy the product they think is for the creative people, right? IBM notebook was a better product, but people didn't want that. It didn't symbolize something cool and sexy and creativity. So I think marketing is about, again, similar to sales, selling the sizzle, but it's also about understanding who your customer is, how to reach that niche, and then how to work with that niche to expand into the wider world if you want to scale. It's the staircase method. What's your staircase? What's going to make you stand out? How can you evolve that thing that makes you stand out and go even further? Number 3 is systems. When you're doing marketing, it is such an overwhelming thing. There's so many different ways you can do it. You can do email marketing. You can do social media. You can do PR. You can do branding. You can do events. I mean, the list never ends. So how do you decide which one to do? Well, first of all, whatever you do, you've got to build a system to do it. So if it is email marketing, then you have a good data collection system. You have a good data management system. And then you have a good way of pushing out the content to that database. And whatever one of these things you do, if you do all of them or you do one of them, do them well. Do not do all of them and all of them badly. I see so many people with on their website, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram links, and then you click through to them and they're dead. You're better off doing one well. Now, I think marketing is something where you should spread your bet. You want to do many different ways, what I call entrances into your business. You want to do many of them as you can. But do not overstretch yourself. It's better to do one platform on social media really well than try and spread yourself thin. But if you set up a system for doing your social media, there is a chance you can do all of them well with the same amount of resources doing one of them well. So for example, on my social media, I have one core video and then we edit it in-app for each of the channels. So we don't have to record separate videos for each of the channels, but we do in-app edit them so they're actually tailored to that particular platform's nuances, be it their font or their image. So you can actually set up a system to do all of these marketing things, but the key, of course, is not only just systems, but making sure you pick what works for you. Now, when it comes to marketing, one of the big mistakes I see people get taught is marketing is about having the staircase only. It's not about having the staircase only. It is about applying what you like to do as a founder, or maybe what your team likes to do, into your marketing strategy. As an example, if you don't like talking on camera, that's not your thing. As long as you're not hiding away from learning something new and you genuinely don't like to do it, but for example, you love to write, then doing an email marketing strategy is probably right for you. Posting on LinkedIn is probably the correct platform for you. Sure, you'll hear people talking about how good TikTok is and how much benefit they've got from it, but it doesn't work for you. It's not sustainable for you. It's not something you're going to enjoy. And marketing is something fun. This is something I want you to take away. No one talks about it, but marketing is meant to be fun. I took my son to buy that staircase. We had a laugh. Once we got the staircase, we had a laugh cleaning it up. We had a laugh putting a blimp on top of it. We had a laugh putting a doorbell on the front of it. We enjoyed the whole bloody thing. And if you don't enjoy it, what's the point? Marketing is about enjoying it. That's why I see brands do well. I'll give you an example. Starbucks marketing in the early days was two things. First, they would take good locations, sometimes quite close to each other. So instead of getting a billboard advertising Starbucks, they'd open up another Starbucks. And even if it was loss-making, as long as it wasn't more expensive in its loss than a billboard, they were better off having a store. Then people could have the experience. They never did any billboards. It's changed now, and I would argue it's not as good a brand anymore, but they opened up locations. That was one of their marketing strategies. The second thing that they did that was really clever is they looked after their staff, which sounds really obvious, doesn't it? But they did. They talk about their staff as partners. The baristas are partners. In some respects, the internal training manual talked about their baristas as the customer. And it worked. In the early days of Starbucks, say what you like about them today, but in the early days of Starbucks, When I used to walk in there, a barista would know my name, they'd know what drink I wanted, and they were just working for Starbucks. But they cared because they were looked after. They were given medical care, for example. They were given full-time medical care even if they were part-time staff. They were given insurance and looked after, and they were given days off if they didn't feel very well. They were looked after. And I think that this is also part of marketing. It might not sound it, but if your people don't represent you, then good luck making everything else represent you, because those people will create all the things that represent you. So do include fun into your business. Do look at the nuances of your business and figure out what is going to be your staircase, and ultimately apply your marketing love to something that's sustainable, that's going to be enjoyable, that's going to be able to actually deliver the very thing that you want it to deliver, which I think should always be the promise of a better future for your customers. Next up, how to PR your business. Now, some of these things are interconnected, and sales and marketing all connect to how to get PR. But I'm going to give you some hacks and some insights in how PR works. And it is quite a complicated subject, but it's something, if you get right, it can be a game changer for your business. Now, first up, I'll say getting PR has to be very targeted. I know plenty of people that have got PR for the money they've raised in their company, and it will go out to platforms like TechCrunch. It will make them feel good. They have no impact on their business other than to make them feel good, which is fine, I guess. I do think PR should be more strategic. I'd rather spend time reaching the press and actually getting a tangible result and not just playing to ego. So recently, for example, I was featured on the BBC News. They talked about what we were doing at the doorbell where people could pitch their dreams, and this led to hundreds of people finding out about it, going to our staircase, pitching their dream and helping them make their dream happen. Now that, in my opinion, is targeted marketing. Equally, I have done recently an article in a business journal that got zero reaction. Now, I was proud to be in the business journal. I don't want to say which one it is so I don't insult them, but ultimately it actually led to no value as far as what I wanted to do, was help people do what they love and make sure people know there's a service out there for free to help them do what they love. So PR is very important to be targeted. And so I'll write that down first. Now, targeting can also be subjective, because a bit like marketing itself and sales, of course, sometimes you do need to cast the net wide and get as much coverage as you can. But if you do start to target your actual needs, it's much easier to get PR. I'll give you an example. If, for example, you want to let people know that you are now selling cherries on the side of the street, the best thing to do is get some PR in the local area that you live. Now, as much as it might be nice to say you've started a cherry farm, selling cherries on the side of the street to make that farm work, probably could get you in a mainstream news channel, it won't necessarily lead to sales in the location in which you sell those cherries. So targeting and understanding exactly who you're trying to reach is actually the key. And it's more likely that if you are selling cherries in East Sussex, the East Sussex Times will cover you. It's more relevant, more chances of actually getting the PR than, say, for example, the BBC covering it, because it's not necessarily going to be that interesting. You can tend to spend a lot of time and money reaching those people and then not cover you. The second thing I'll teach you about PR is journalists are lazy. So if you understand this and understand if you provide everything for them, then they don't need to do any work, because you're more likely to get the press coverage. So what I always do is I actually write the press release like it's the actual story you want written, with a good headline that makes them happy that they're not selling you. That's, journalists don't want to write and sell you, they want to write something interesting for the reader. So making a good subject line that's good for the reader, making the story good for the reader, I do all the work for the journalist. And then things like photos, I take high resolution photos and I send them with the press clip to make sure they've got everything they need. All they have to do is say yes to the story and then put their own touch on it. Job done. They're human beings. They want to go out for lunch if they can. So if you can make it possible for them to go out for lunch and do their job, then you will win in PR. Too many people are lazy. They send press releases that are generic and they don't tailor it to the journalist they're writing to. So the other thing you need to do is research that journalist. Back to the targeting, you need to understand what that journalist writes about, what that journalist is interested in, and almost write in their style if you want that particular journalist to write about you. The third thing on PR I'll tell you is, there is a lot of companies out there that will tell you they can get you PR. Please be careful. Now, as much as it might be nice to just pay someone to do this, I have discovered doing the PR yourself, especially if you're a small business, can pay huge dividends. Why? Because you can make a relationship direct with the journalist. And how do you find these journalistic contacts? That's what the PR companies tell you they've got. You can go for a newspaper and find them. You can Google them. You'll find them quite quick. One big hack I'll give you is Twitter in particular is really good to get hold of journalists. If you start following the journalists that you want to write about you and you start engaging on their posts, I would say that's one of the best ways to start building up a relationship with a journalist. Most people will reply to comment or read a comment you've made in one of their posts. And weirdly enough, often journalists don't have big followings and they don't actually have a lot of comments. So you can start making a relationship, start commenting on something. If they post something about global warming and you've got a product that's helping reduce global warming, then you will get noticed if you start commenting on a story they've done about it. Start being part of their thinking when it comes to, I need someone to help me write this story. I need someone to give me a quote to make this story better. Start becoming part of that journalist's life. And it starts with just following them on Twitter or replying to one of their comments, engaging in one of the stories they've already written. Even online, things like Daily Mail, the journalists will read the comments on their own story. So engage. Engage. It's the number one thing I can tell you when it comes to getting PR from journalists. And finally, I have been involved in many conversations where I know brands have not worked with someone because they saw on someone's social media that they posted something obscene or rude or stupid. Remember that you as a business owner will always be the number one PR engine. Whatever you post up, be conscious, be careful. Think about your brand, think about the image that you're projecting. And I can't tell you enough how important this is. Because if you do the first few things I've just mentioned, you connect with the press, you know who you're targeting, and you're not lazy, you help them do it. If a journalist sees that you are out of control or inappropriate, they will not risk their job to write about you. So learn to be disciplined. Learn to be the brand. PR starts with one person having respect for you. So make sure you're disciplined. Don't be lazy yourself. Next up, one of my favorite subjects, one of the questions I get asked the most, how to get an investor. Learning how to get an investor can dramatically change the trajectory of your business. Equally though, just before I go into how to get an investor, I want you to think carefully about whether or not you need an investor. Now, I have invested in 78 companies. You can go on my website, simonscribb.com, and look at some of the companies I've invested in. I have seen it all. And sometimes, if you get the wrong investor or get an investor for the wrong reasons, you will have a new boss and your life will become a nightmare. It will be easy at the beginning when you get the money and will get harder over time if you do it wrong. I will try to teach you how to not get it wrong, but equally, please ask yourself, is there another way to make the business work? And I'm going to touch on other ways that you could make it work, even if you don't get an investor, within this how to get an investor chat. Now, there are quite a few different ways to get an investor depending on the stage of your business and how much you're trying to raise. If you're trying to raise money in the early days of a business, I would say to you, the more traction you have in your business, the easier it is to get an investor. Now that does not mean to say if you just have an idea, you can't get an investor. You definitely can. There's just less people that will fund it. So just like the sales stuff I taught you earlier, it's probably better to make sure that you actually know who you're targeting when you're getting an investor. What is the profile of the person you want? So if you're going after someone that perhaps will fund a business that has no traction, it's just an idea, then remember, those people's profiles, they probably want quite a lot of equity. They probably want some involvement in the business to make sure it works. They probably want some sector relevance, industry relevance to your business, so they can add value. Because no investor, I don't care who they are, just want to feel like money. Everybody wants to feel like they're bringing some sort of value. In fact, I would argue you shouldn't invest in a business unless you can bring value. You've got to make the value the thing that gives you the edge to make that investment work. Otherwise, you might just invest in the stock market. If you can't bring value, you might as well invest in the stock market. And I don't think you make money from the stock market. Middle class people make money from the stock market. You make money like Warren Buffett makes money. You own a piece of a company you can influence, you can help make sure it's successful. So do your research. These are the types of profiles that are often the best. Family and friends. Now I know family and friends can be difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people don't have family and friends with money, and I totally understand that, and I'll come to other methods, but I just want to touch on this first, because family and friends, the reason it's such a good thing to do is because they know you. You don't have to convince someone of your personality, your profile, your dedication, they will know all of that. They'll know the true you most of the time. That can be really powerful in speeding up the process of getting the money you need. Now, of course, we all know it can get messy if you take money off family and friends and you don't pay them back. So tell them the truth. They can lose all their money. That's all you need to do. You can tell them they can lose all their money. In the wish to get investment, we sometimes go down the road of overselling it, and that's totally normal. But please be careful with this, especially with family and friends. If you tell them, you invest in my business, it could all go wrong, you can lose everything. And after that, it's up to them. But you make it clear. Don't oversell it that it's a guaranteed win. It cannot be a guaranteed win. Nothing ever is unless you've watched all of this video, of course, there's a high chance, but you know what I mean. Please be careful. But I have seen it work, and often family and friends can also help you, which in the early days of any business, if that's the stage you're at, then getting help is probably more valuable than money. But I've seen it work, so do give it serious consideration. And of course, friend of a friend can also be the way to raise money. If you don't have someone in your family that's rich, maybe you've got a friend who has a family that's rich. Learn to leverage the network, because your friend recommending you to someone who's rich will be powerful, and doesn't mean it'll also save you time. In the VC world, which I'll talk about in a minute, getting a recommendation is the only way to get investment. They don't take applications online, despite what their websites say. I've seen it, they don't. They take it from recommendation. So start really networking. The second thing I'll say, and I've never seen anyone else talk about this when it comes to getting an investor, and that is consider the people you want to work with you in your company as potential investors. So sometimes when you're profiling the people you want in your business, you will look at it and say, right, well, I can't afford the best, so I'll get this person, right? Which is fine, I understand that. But the smart people think differently. The smart people think, who are the best? And let's say I'm building right now a competitor to LinkedIn, helpbank.com. So I think, who's number 2 at LinkedIn? I want them to come and join me. They're never going to be number 1 at LinkedIn, not for a long time, but maybe they want the chance to build their own LinkedIn, come and join me. Now the great thing about the number 2 at LinkedIn, definitely got some money in the bank, right? Some money to invest in the business. So I can, and I've done this many times, so this isn't just a theory, but look at your team. Look at your team members as potential investors. In the platform I'm running today, helpbank.com, the people that are involved in this business have invested in this business. Callum, who's behind the camera right now, has put his own money into this business. And he's got equity because of it, and he's taken a lower salary initially, so there's all sorts of benefits to actually doing it this way. You can get your cost down, you can get the best in class involved in the business, and you can bring money in to help make the company work. And it's much better to have money from people that are actually working in the business than people externally who are asking you for a report of when they're going to get their money back. The third thing you can do, and of course this is more traditional, but it is very complex, so I'll try to explain how to go about getting this type of person in the business, but it's an angel investor. Now you might have heard the term many times. You've probably watched rubbish shows like Dragon's Den and thought that getting an investor is the dragon or the angel sits there with all the money and you are desperately trying to get that money off them by making them see your vision. That is the wrong way to get an angel investor. The best way to get an angel investor on board, once you've identified them and done the research to find out who they are, you've been very clear about what you're going to give them if they invest. All of that is common sense, right? I don't need to teach you that right now. Of course you need to know how much you're going to give them and why, and I'll get into equity in it a little bit later in the video so you can try to work that bit out. But once you've established who you want as an investor and what you will need to give them, the way to get an investor is completely opposite to what you think. You think getting an investor is, hi, I've got a business, this is this business, would you like to invest? No. The best way to get an angel investor is not ask for money. The best way to get an angel investor is ask for help. Because you've identified the right investor, they want to feel value. If they can't bring value, they don't want to invest. And often, if you do it right, it's not like Dragon's Den. I've invested in 78 businesses. I always feel honoured and lucky when I get to invest in a successful business. They do not treat me like a dragon. They do not treat me with awe. They treat me with respect. But they also identify why they've approached me, how I can bring value, and make me feel special. And ultimately, I then feel lucky to be involved in that business if they do that right. If you ask me for advice, you're more likely to get money out of me than you straight up ask me for money. Now, I'm not saying don't build ask into the process. Of course, when you do a pitch to an angel investor, you should definitely put in there you're looking for money. the best way to put it is we're looking for money from the right people. Make it a little harder for people to get involved in your business. That's how you get an angel investor. You create FOMO, right? FOMO, you've probably heard it, but in case you haven't, it's probably one of the most powerful things. Fear of missing out. You make people understand, you do it sincerely, that if they don't invest, they're missing out. That is the key to getting an angel investor. Now, of course, treat an angel investor with respect. If you can prepare correct and appropriate amount of equity they're going to get, make it clear why, explain your long-term investment plans, so how they're going to dilute, because angel investors often get diluted. So if you're offering them 5%, it might sound like a lot, but if you get another investor and another investor as things go down the line, that person could end up with 1% of the company or 0.5% of the company. And remember, most angel investors will be involved in the business. So make sure you actually need them to help you. Don't just pretend that they need you, you need them. Because once you get them on board as an investor, it will go pear-shaped. So it's not just about convincing the person to get on board, it's also convincing yourself they're the right person to have with you on this journey in the long term. Make sure you do that. Now, the fourth way of getting an investor, more traditional, VCs, venture capitalists. Now these types of profiles often a little bit further down the line in your business model than just a startup or an idea. Most of the time, nearly all VCs, although things have changed a little bit when there was a lot of money in the market, but most VCs will genuinely want a business that's proven that needs capital to scale. So the way to get a VC on board, a couple of ways. First, you identify, have they got money? Now, what happens with a lot of VCs is they're raising funds and they're deploying funds and then they're raising funds again. And they won't necessarily tell you. They'll take a meeting with you, they might meet you and understand your business, but they won't necessarily have the funds. And they'll tell you, what we joke in the VC world is you're too tall for radio. So you go for a job interview at a radio station, and they reject you in that job, and the interview rejection reason is you were too short for radio. In other words, it's bullshit. They don't tell you why. But you can find out if they're raising. You can Google them to find this out. Don't waste time approaching VCs that are raising money. They won't deploy the capital, they will waste your time. The other thing you can do, and I think it's very important, is see who they've invested in before. And there's a good chance if they've invested in a similar business to yours, it's one of two things. It's either bad news or good news for you. If it's good, then they will invest in many different companies. So for example, there was an investment company that invested in all the Uber type businesses. They invested in Uber, they invested in Lyft, they invested in all of them. They hedged their bet that one of them was going to win, they wanted to be a part of all of them to make sure that they didn't lose. Other VCs will only invest in one company in that category. So just make sure you understand that. But if it's bad news and they only invest in one company in that category, then you can go to the competitor of that VC and create a rivalry between the VC firms. I've seen it play out many times. You make them feel like, well, they've invested in Uber, but I'm Lyft and I think we're going to beat Uber. Would you like to invest in us? And it's primal, but it works. So think about, again, have they got money? Don't waste time selling to people that don't have that. See the investor companies they've invested in before, understand that. And then 3, try to get connected to a previous company that VC has invested in. It's much more powerful for you to get introduced by one of the other portfolio companies of that VC than you personally approaching that VC. So try to make connections. And it's also good due diligence, by the way. If you speak to the company that got investment from that VC, you can find out whether that VC was decent or not, because some of these VCs are awful. So you can do your due diligence, at the same time, hopefully make a relationship with a founder that can introduce you to the VC when the time is right. Now the 5th way, again, I've never seen this way explained to people before, and it's not traditional, but I have done it many, many times, and that is work with your brand partner or a client to fund your growth. So I had an office in Hong Kong and a client wanted us to open up in the Middle East. And I was a bit reluctant, which is why I think I found out about this hack. So I originally said, we don't want to open up there. I think they just wanted us to open up there and then service them, and they didn't want to spend any money doing it. But because we said no and they really wanted to work with us there, they offered to pay us to open up there. So this is a hack I learned, and I will use it many, many, many more times after this, that sometimes your client who wants your service or the brand that's sponsoring you will pay for your expansion. Sometimes it's easier for them to do that than go out and build it themselves, for example, or work with a new partner that doesn't understand their philosophy. So your existing clients can be your investor. And it can be really powerful if you do it right too, because that client then feels invested in your success. They're not going to make you go for a tender every year. They're not going to chop and change you as a client or partner or supplier, because they want you to succeed because they own equity in you. Now, of course, you have to do this carefully. So for example, if one of your clients is a bank and they invest in you, it can get very messy suddenly on the legal side. Equally, if you are working with a particular provider, let's say in my case, I work with lots of different online service providers, but I'm partnered with GoDaddy. But if GoDaddy invested in my business, it means all the other online suppliers probably wouldn't work with me, which would not help the people I'm trying to help, which is people starting businesses. So I think it's quite important to make sure you get the right client or the right brand to invest in you, but it can be huge money. And brands do have investment divisions. Google Ventures, Google it. Ironic. They invest in businesses. They invested in a coffee shop called Blue Bottle, a coffee shop. So it's possible to get Google to invest in your business, but you have to understand, again, the motives. Go back to my sales point I made in the video, earlier in the video. If you want to understand how to sell to these brands, use that sales system again. But ultimately, it's a way to raise money. Now, there's one final way I want to quickly flush out with you to raise money to make your business work. Now, it kind of touched on what I said at the beginning of this part of the video, and that is, make sure you need an investor. Sometimes when people are asking me for money, I will ask them what they're using the money for. And most of the time, not always, but quite often, it's to get more sales, to grow the product, to make sure more people can buy the product and so on. But when I dig in, it's not money from me that they need. They just need a better sales system. So often when it comes to raising money, you'll find that if you can actually go look at your business and you might say to yourself, well, I need the money to buy the product. Well, you can do crowdfunding, for example. You can find methods of selling your product ahead of time through platforms like Indiegogo and platforms that will pre-sell your product to get you the revenue you need in advance. And you're not giving away any equity when you do that. You can pre-sell your product on certain crowdfunding sites before it's made. And then you can go and use the money you got from that pre-order to go and make it. And that is often a much better way than raising money from an investor. Of course, crowdfunding is quite big. Across the board now, you can raise money crowdfunding. You can do equity crowdfunding, and there's plenty of sites that do that. I'll put some links down below in the video if you want to check out who they are. But ultimately, you want to figure out whether or not you really need the money from a customer pre-buying it, or from an investor who's going to help bring value, or from a community that's going to support you in the future. You can do crowdfunding where you sell your product. You can do crowdfunding where you sell equity. You can do crowdfunding where ultimately it's just a loan. You can do crowdfunding where people just support you, like GoFundMe. Crowdfunding is definitely one of the ways I think today you should leverage before going to the more traditional routes of, say, a VC or an angel, or of course, family and friends. So crowdfunding is powerful, and don't overlook it. I'm going to put the links to all the different types of crowdfunding sites down below. Go check them out and let me know if you have any questions on this subject, because it is a complicated one. I will do a video in the future about how to launch a proper crowdfunding site, but that's not now. How to get a sponsor. This is something I get asked all the time. I'm going to give you the code. I'm going to give you the cheat code, I guess, on how to do it. And I want to first of all say, if any sponsors are listening to this, I have applied this technique on you, so forgive me. The first is understanding why sponsorship deals happen. We can get into what sponsorship deal structures are, and that's quite complex in itself, but I want to give you the tool today to get a sponsor on board. And the way to understand a sponsor, there's two things that makes a sponsor come on board. One is value return, right? What they invest in sponsoring you, they get back in some form, right? Be that in views or be that in sales, they get value back, ideally trackable value. So billboard companies, which I think are a joke, really what they value-wise give back to a brand, sell because they show how many people walk past that billboard, how many people are looking at that billboard each day. And brands love that stuff. So proper ROI on their investment. The second way, and this one's a bit more tricky, but very powerful if you get it right, is the emotional sell, right? So you see this quite a lot in like local football clubs in England. Big brands sometimes are sponsoring small local football clubs. Why? Because the CEO plays football there, or the CEO grew up there playing football. Basically, the emotional sale. Now, I have used both of these to get deals. And both of them can actually work together. They're not mutually exclusive. Frankly, sometimes the emotional sale with the value return is probably the holy grail. You can make it personal for the brand and the people running the brand. Don't overlook them. If you're going to make it emotional for the person who runs the brand, alongside bring proper value, most of the time you can get a brand deal. Now, where people fall over is not structuring value for a sponsor, or, and this is probably the third thing I'd highlight that's important to get a sponsorship deal, you've not understood the brand. Now, I have made this mistake many times. I launched a business called Coaster Ads, and it was brilliant marketing. I took all the bars in Hong Kong and I put ads on coasters. I took out the Carlsberg coasters and the Heineken coasters and I put in coasters with ads on them. And it was brilliant because you put your drink down on that coaster, you up and down, look at it for an hour at least as you're putting the drink on it and picking it up. It was brilliant retention, brilliant engagement. People saw the ads every time. They're brilliant. But I tried to sell that service, that coaster ad service, to a jewelry business. And of course, they laughed at me. In fact, I lost them as a client on the agency side because they thought I didn't understand their brand. I was so sure that that jewelry brand would get traction, which they would have done, but I didn't remember what their brand philosophy was. And they're high-end, they're fashionable, they don't want a beer sat on top of them. I made a mistake. I didn't understand the brand. And this is where you need to get really, really clear. What is the brand value? And so in that case, in the jewelry case, they want to sponsor, 007 movies with James Bond's girlfriend wearing the jewelry and looking sexy. They want to be involved in things that are not linked to beer, that are not linked to somebody drunk putting their beer down on their brand. Now, I did eventually sell coaster ads out to airlines that wanted to promote going from Hong Kong to Singapore and so on and so forth. So I eventually did really well with that brand. But initially I learned an important lesson. Understand the brand, understand what their values are, understand how they traditionally advertise. So Visa, for example, Visa advertised at the Olympics. They not only sponsor the Olympics, then they spend a lot of money promoting the fact that they're at the Olympics. Too many people go to Visa and ask for sponsorship without understanding that probably the biggest activation that Visa ever do is the Olympics. So you're better off going and selling some value linked to the Olympics, as opposed to saying, please sponsor my event, because they're saying, we sponsor the Olympics. We sponsor the biggest event in the world. Now you want us to sponsor your event? Brand values and understanding what that brand wants is key. But I mentioned it briefly a second ago, but I want to highlight it as important. Don't forget the people in these brands. Research who they are. Understand what their motives are. Some of the brands that sponsor me today, GoDaddy and Thai Banking, the people that run those brands care as much about entrepreneurs as the brands themselves. So when they see that me and my team are helping people, genuinely helping people have a better life, not only do the people buy in to becoming a sponsor for us, the brand alignment is there and it happens. Right now, this does tie into the emotional sale somewhat, because for example, one of the people I worked with, GoDaddy, had a small business. She knew how hard it was to make that business work. So when she sees what we're doing alongside what GoDaddy does, this isn't a sponsored video by the way, but I'm just highlighting the example so you learn. Ultimately, these people make a difference in that brand. That brand is made up of people. So as long as those people don't get fired for sponsoring something that has no relevance to their brand, you can actually end up having champions inside these companies for you to help you get the sponsorship, and I've had that many, many times. Now, the fifth way to get a brand to sponsor you that no one talks about, I don't know why, maybe it's some sort of industry dirty secret, but it's a very, very powerful way of getting a brand to sponsor on board, is work with someone that's already working with one of these brands. An agent is often one way to describe it, but there are two types of typical agents that brands work with. There is a media buying company. This is a company that will go out and buy all the ad space for that brand. They're paid by the brand to go and get the best deals possible and buy up ad space. You can talk to these media buyers, and often it can be better to talk to them than go direct to the brand, because the brand is too busy with its day-to-day to deal with you as a media owner. They would prefer to deal with the media buyer, one contact, and then that media buyer will deal with everybody that wants to sell media. So recently someone came to me and said they've got a fleet of vans and they want to get brands to advertise on their vans. And they tried going direct to brands and brands said no. I gave them a contact and the media buyer said great, and they bought all the inventory. It's much quicker. The media buyer has a relationship with the brands and often they hold the money. The brand's already allocated the money to the media buyer. So stop trying to sell to the brand, sell to the media buyer. The other way to do it is via the agencies. So I used to own an agency. It's one of the reasons I know this subject so well. But a brand will have a company that will come up with a campaign idea for them. Now, often when you're coming up with a campaign for a brand, you're also looking at how the campaign will be applied in the real world. So it might go on taxis, it might go on a bus, it might go on a coaster. So you can actually tap into these agencies. Examples without showing any preference, there's people like MC Saatchi, Ogilvy, Leo Burnett. These agencies already have the relationship with the company. And if you get in there with your idea or your product, they can often insert it or even come up with a campaign to sell it into the brand for you. Now, I personally prefer to deal with brands direct many times, but do not neglect. Media buyers are your friends and agencies can be your friends, and it can be a much quicker sell to get them on board as a sponsor. One of the best hacks to get a brand as a sponsor is to be personally really vested in that brand. So, for example, we recently, as you know, I mentioned it earlier, put a doorbell on the bottom of our staircase that people could press that doorbell, pitch their dream, and we would help them. We decided the best product for us to do that, the most economical product that worked on the internet, was Ring Doorbell, owned by Amazon. Now, we didn't ask Ring to sponsor us, we didn't ask Amazon to sponsor us. It was just the best product, we believed in the product, and suited what we were trying to do. So we installed it and we marketed it, and of course, guess who's seen it? Ring and Amazon. So now, who are we now working with? Amazon. Now, of course, what I'm talking about here is just using the brand in your life and therefore it being a natural fit for the brand to work with you. When I wear Whoop out on the street, it's natural I'm wearing it because I like the product, and then Whoop will see me with millions of views on my videos wearing a Whoop and they will contact me. So I think that just leaning in to a brand relationship and not initially thinking about the money. Back to some of the points I was making in some of the other areas earlier, delayed gratification in sponsorship can also be very powerful. Just work with brands that you love will always be easier than forcing a brand into your ecosystem, but also just doing stuff with that brand as part of your day-to-day business life can lead to sponsorship. How to build a brand. Now, this subject is complex and exciting. If you get it right, a lot of the things I talked about earlier, like sales and marketing, will happen naturally, but it is complex. Now, there's lots of videos out there about what is a brand, so I'm not going to bore you with that. It's obvious. It's ultimately a statement about what you are doing. You want people to look at it and know. I love the images. I've seen many. You can take away the logo, you can take away everything, and you still know it's that brand. It's not about the actual logo, the design. Branding is about the purpose of the business, the essence of what you're doing. Nike is about supporting athletes. Apple is about supporting creativity. Ultimately, when you're coming to figure out your own brand, I would start with your personal brand because it's a really good way of figuring out how to build a brand. Why? You know you, right? If you're honest about yourself, you can make a brand persona. And you start with writing down your values. What do you care about? What are your non-negotiables? What will you say no to? What will you say yes to? Understanding your personality, understanding what it is you want to do, that's what your brand is about. That's who you are. Now, you will already have a personal brand, and anyone that doesn't want a personal brand, I'm sorry, you're gonna have one no matter what. People will talk about you when you're not in the room. You need to embrace personal branding. And by understanding how others perceive you, it can literally change the trajectory of your life. Now, I have some real gripes with personal brand, and it's not very scalable. Only in certain exceptions, around people like Kardashians and so on, can you actually scale a personal brand. As someone that's built a personal brand, as someone that's got 4 million followers, that spent 4 years building a personal brand here in the UK, I can tell you it is sometimes a pain in the arse. I am responsible now, no matter what, to do videos like this and post up stuff even when I'm tired. Like now, I'm actually tired and I still have to do this video because if I don't do it, you probably won't take it seriously. I could give this knowledge to my colleague and give it to you and you probably wouldn't listen. So you need to hear it from someone that's been there and done it, like me. And I understand that, and I actually do love doing these videos and helping you, but I'm just trying to highlight. The personal brand side is dangerous if that's all you build. You have to take personal brand seriously. You have to identify what your personal brand is. And by the way, I know people that have made their personal brand not being on social media. Their personal brand is they don't get back to you in email. That's actually sometimes what makes them unique. That's their personal brand. I don't reply to DMs. I want to make videos like this that bring you value. I want to do lives, that means I interact in the real world with real people. I have my rules, I have my values. I'm dyslexic, so I don't like reading DMs, but having those rules and having that discipline will ultimately help you define what people say about you instead of people saying it without you having defined it. But brand values of your own can teach you how you need to do exactly the same for your company name. So let's take my brand, HelpBank. Right, HelpBank has a lot of the traits that I personally value. Honesty, openness, authenticity, value. These are all words in my personal brand persona that I have translated into my company persona. However, HelpBank's long-term future also involves helping people with finance. Finance is not a word I use on my personal brand, and also supporting people to get the funding they need is something I have personally done many, many times, but as an organisation, as a platform, it's going to be a much more serious thing for HelpBank. So when the branding was designed, we said it has to look a little bit more serious than the Simon Squibb brand, because ultimately we'll be funding people's dreams at scale, and people need to trust if we tell them we're going to fund their dreams, it's actually going to happen. So the HelpBank branding is a combination of the Simon Squibb branding and our competitors potentially in the future. We want to make it look serious. It has some element of fun, but ultimately it has its own brand persona. And all you need to do initially to get the brand right is write down all the different brand values. Now, I want to teach you about how companies apply brand at scale. And there's a few different ways it generally plays out. So let's take a brand like Canon. And Canon run a brand method which we call reference, right? And reference is when they leverage someone else's brand to make their brand look good. So Canon, for example, worked with a photographer called Peter McKinnon, who is a brilliant photographer. I'm a big fan of his. And by sponsoring him, by supporting him, they don't need that person as a CEO in their company like Apple have done. They have it external. Nike also do this. I mentioned it earlier. Nike will sponsor top performing athletes with nice personalities that have values, and that therefore becomes part of the Nike brand. So they use this reference model to make their own brand look good. Now Apple, as I mentioned earlier, they use a different method. I call this the leadership method. And the leadership method is basically where you have a person in the company that represents the brand values. Now, in HelpBank, I am that person. Probably in your business, you are, if you're a small business owner, the person that is the leadership value brand ambassador for your company. You're probably the one that asked to go on stage and talk about your business. You're the one in sales meetings. Whatever your business model is, you're probably the one representing the brand. Of course, your staff will represent the brand. Your office environment will represent the brand. Like I said earlier, the days when you go out, have a party and post on your social media will represent your brand. But when it comes to making your brand values clear, you do it by these two methods. You either have a reference model, which means you sponsor certain people that represent your brand value, or you have a leadership model, which is you personally in the company leading the charge to make sure people understand your brand. And I think when it comes to brand building, there are some risks in both of these models. Now, in the reference model, if a celebrity that's supporting your brand does something bad, that can affect your brand. Now, this happens a lot, and they often get fired quick. I think one of the most famous cases, Kanye West, who of course got dropped by Adidas, and then lawsuits galore. But what I'm saying is though, what's good about the reference model is you don't have to spend 4 years building up social media presence like me. I've spent every single day for 4 years doing a post, building up a community. You can just leverage all of that hard work and your brand can have the halo effect of working with me. But the downside is, what if I do something bad? Then your brand is at risk. So you need to have mechanisms in place to make sure you're protected as a brand. That's how you scale brand. And of course, the leadership model also has its weaknesses. We all saw this a little bit with Steve Jobs. When Steve Jobs left Apple, Apple had a real problem for a long time. They put so much of their brand value in the Steve Jobs brand that when he left, the magic left was often what people say, right? So you have to make sure that you as a leader, it's sustainable for you to be that leader and lead that brand effort, and or there's a good transition model in place. And again, when Steve Jobs went back to Apple, he did have a strong transition model with Tim Cook. Now, Tim Cook's an interesting one because he's not Steve Jobs, of course, but he is Mr. Data. He's someone you trust with your data, right? They picked him in part because he looks trustworthy, he talks in a very trustworthy and transparent way, and in Apple's process of building a brand, today that is more important to them than a maverick leader telling you about a brilliant product. In fact, the Apple iPhone hasn't changed much since Steve Jobs died. But the point I'm trying to make here is, if you want a brand to be successful, you've got to pick one of these two strategies. Now you can do both, of course, but you probably double the risk of having some problem in your business. And whichever path you choose, make sure you think it through right to the end. Have the ability to cut that influencer out of your business if anything goes wrong. And equally, if you're running the leadership model, make sure that that leader has a transition plan, because at some point we're all going to die. Now hopefully we're all going to live forever. With Elon Musk's help, I'm sure that's true. But I will tell you now, the final thing, really important in brand, learn to say no. If you don't say no to the wrong relationships, the wrong brand partnerships, the wrong clients, your brand will get damaged. I have had this experience myself. I spent 10 years building up a brand, I had a fantastic reputation, and then I got a bad client that didn't understand how the world works and made my brand shit with their big mouth and their lies. And this can be hugely damaging. We all have probably heard the saying, if you spend 30 years building a reputation, it only takes 5 seconds for it to go to shit. I tell you from experience that saying no to things is powerful. If you have an inkling, spider senses that someone isn't good or a brand isn't good, or don't match with your morals, do not take their money, say no. Your brand is the most valuable asset you will ever build. My company got sold for a lot of money in the end because I had a good brand image. I had a good brand value. They told me they bought the brand, not the business. Build a brand, not a business, and I promise you that brand will live forever. Next up, how to hire, how to grow, and how to build. These 3 things are interlinked. And if you get this formula right, your business can take off and forever give you the income you need, be a brand you love, and ultimately not be a management nightmare that a lot of people have when they build a business. So, first of all, how to hire. I always tell people, if your business has a purpose and the people you hire believe in that purpose, you will never have to manage anybody. You will be managing purpose, not people. One of the big things people complain to me about is managing people. And often when I look at their business to see why, because they have not installed a purpose in their business that resonates with the people that they've hired. And sometimes, some businesses later install a purpose, but then that purpose just becomes a slogan on the wall because the people they hired in the early days weren't hired around purpose. You have to have this at the center of it all. And when you hire someone, always check they genuinely care about that purpose. Some people will pay you lip service to get the job. So there is a few hacks that you can do to make sure that person really cares. First of all, go check out their social media. Go see what that person really cares about. You will see it. If they care about the planet, if you see them driving around in some gas-guzzling car, they probably don't care about the environment. So actually doing your research on your hires, being careful about the people you bring into your purpose matters. Check their history. Check for references. I don't know why people don't do this. People don't ask for references anymore. I don't know why. Now I know in England it's illegal to give someone a bad reference, but if you ask right, I don't want people to have a bad employee in their life if I had that bad employee in mind. It's important that we share these things to help that employee get better. And if they had a bad reference, they'd act better, they'd do a better job. Now ultimately, I think when hiring people, the key is give them equity. Now, I'm going to talk more about equity a little bit later in the video. It always comes up, but if you give your team equity, they are aligned with your success. Now, any owner of any business knows that the real value in a company is not its turnover, it's in its brand. And if over 10 years an employee helps make that brand grow but are only taking an income, they're never getting their true value. You have to own equity in the business that you are working in. Now, there's many different ways to do it. So if you're working for someone today, of course, you can go ask for equity in that company. You've got nothing to lose. They'll probably laugh. They might say no. I promise you they'll respect you more, especially if they're a founder. The second thing is you can build a business where you work with that company, but you own equity in it. So you can start your own company, but have equity in that company and then work for that person. Now, the point I'm telling you here is that give your employees respect. If you want to keep people and you want them to be motivated, have this conversation openly. Talk about this subject. You should be saying they should have equity. Now, it might not be possible to give people equity straight away. It might not be something you feel comfortable with doing straight away. But I promise you, your turnover will be less, your stress will be less, your company will be stronger if that person in your company has equity. And most people don't have the guts to do it. And they then spend years stressing they can't find anyone, or that they can't find anyone that actually cares. It's because they don't own what you own. Give them a piece of the business and you'll have loyalty. Of course, it comes with its risks. But in my opinion, high turnover, high management, high stress is a bigger risk than any equity problem you could have if someone leaves, for example. And ironically, most of the time, why would people leave if they have equity? In fact, I had a case recently. Someone who worked with me for 4 years, I gave them equity in the business and then they left. But because I treated them with respect and because I treated them well and we had a good relationship, when they left, they let me buy that equity back at a very low rate. They were very reasonable. They did not hold me blackmail. Now, of course, if you've hired the right person under purpose and you've given them equity, most good people will not hold you over it to get that equity back. You can be reasonable, but if you've done the right thing in the beginning by giving people equity, it's so easy. Now, the third thing I'll tell you, and this really links to how you grow your business. You can't grow a business without people. I would say that today with AI and all this technology, you'll be able to grow a business with less people, but you won't be able to grow a business with no people. So you need to grow a business through growing its culture. You need to make sure that this business has values. I had a business called Fluid. This business went on to become one of the most successful creative agencies in Asia. I sold to PricewaterhouseCoopers for more money than I'll ever need. And one of the things I did in the early days of that business, which was a big mistake, is I built a business to make money. Now that might not sound like a mistake, but what happened? First year, I hired people, they were new, it was exciting. Second year, people started to leave. Why did they leave? Because the values of the business were wrong. I changed the values in that business. We went from a business that was designed to make money to a business that would protect the staff from bad clients. I had a creative agency. Often designers were treated badly. Do this by tomorrow at 12, I need it, instead of understanding that creativity is a process. So we switched our whole model. And instead of working for clients, we worked for the creative people and helped them manage clients. That transformed our business and helped us grow. By thinking about things differently instead of traditionally, you will grow your business. And by looking after your people, it's cheesy, I know, you can grow much easier. Now, when you grow, assuming you follow my advice and you grow your business, this is the important thing you need to identify. What is your destination? What are you actually growing for? Now, I have a lot of people recently approach me and say, please invest in my business, Simon, I want to grow it. My first question is why? What is it you're trying to do by growing your business? What's the real reason you're growing your business? Is it easy? Do you really want to work more? Or is it you want to make the business bigger so you can bring in management so you can not have to work so hard? So you're working hard to grow it, that's fine. I think you need to grow it. Now, I want to grow the biggest platform in the world that helps people for free learn. So I want it to be big. I know my destination. 10 million people for free start a business and never feel alone doing it. So I know my destiny, and therefore I'm growing both of you from a culture point of view in that direction. I've had points in my life, in the early days, actually I wanted to work 3 days a week, doing cool stuff with brands, and 2 days a week, going to the beach with my girlfriend, having fun. And so I didn't grow the business too much at the beginning. I actually had a different ambition, and there's nothing wrong with that. To grow your business, brilliant. Follow this formula. Have a purpose, bring people in that have value and own value in the business, and will grow if you look after them. And the final thing I'll talk about when it comes to building a business and making a business, first of all, take risk. Make sure that you build these minimum viable products. Try things out. You can't stay stagnant. No company today is around when they stay stagnant. Blockbusters or any of these businesses just sat on their technology like Kodak didn't do anything with it. You can't sit still. Kodak invented the digital camera. You can't sit, you have to put these things to the market. Kodak didn't want the digital camera into the market because it would have meant film was their core business. You've got to disrupt yourself, build a business that's going to last. If you're really a successful company, I'm going to use a dirty word that I personally hate but has saved me. You need to build systems. You need, from what is often in the early days of a business, what a generalist mindset, where everybody can do everything, to a specialist mindset. You need to allow people to be specialists in certain areas. Now, when I was younger, I'm a generalist. I can do kind of everything. I can clean the toilet, company toilets when they're dirty. I can help people get their car loaded up and get to the site to do the pitch. I could do everything. But I became a specialist in marketing. And I think as you grow a business, you have to take away generalist people and build out specialist people. People that do a particular thing well to help the business grow. And that involves building systems that allow people to do that in your hiring process, in your growing process, and in your mindset. Even you, as a founder, potentially, you have to make sure that you learn a skill set. Otherwise, you become redundant, which is fine. I've often got myself replaced in a company that I have built. I think that's actually pretty smart. Unless you can become a specialist, it's probably the best thing for the company too. It's likely to be a CEO out there that's better than you when you're at scale. I found that to be the case many times. I replaced myself at Fluid 11 years in by someone who was a better CEO than me. So hopefully, if you know your purpose and you give purpose to the people you hire, you have equity both for your team and for the wider growth of the business. You know your values and you apply them. You know your destination and you apply this very important point of systems and removing generalism. You have a business that is easy to hire people that will scale and will build into something that lives without you. Let's talk about how to fire someone. Now, I have fired hundreds of people in my career, and I'm going to teach you how to fire someone and also when you're likely to be getting fired. One of the things I hate to do is fire someone. It's a very necessary skill if you want to survive in business. I have off large companies that needed to get small again, various reasons. You have to learn to fire people. It is not nice. But one of the most difficult things about firing people, understanding when to do it. It comes to actually firing people structurally, like doing it legally, send warnings, doing the proper paperwork. All of this stuff you can get off a lawyer. I'm telling you the law. In your country you are, it will be different anyway. I'm going to talk about the actual act and also what's involved in making the decision whether or not someone should be fired. I have a system that I call the 7 and 8. It's very simple and obvious when I first start explaining it. Now, someone in your company and they are really good. You love them, they love you. They're obviously a 9 and 10. You want to keep them and you want them to stay and they want to stay. Most of the time, those people are 9 and 10s because they're enjoying it. Now, of course, like I said earlier, make sure you give these people equity. Make sure you look after these people over time. But you know you want to keep them and they want to stay. It's a no-brainer, it's cool. Then you have the 1s and 2s. These are people who are shit at their job. They know they're shit at their job. You know they're shit at their job. And most of the time, they either quit or you fire them. It's a no-brainer. Everyone feels it. They don't turn up on time. They don't care about the purpose of the company. Whatever it is, it's obvious that relationship comes to an end naturally. The really difficult thing for any employer, and for that matter, any employee, is if you are a 7 and 8, which means you're almost good enough. You're almost able to do the job. And sometimes, as an employer, you're desperately hoping they become good enough. You're waiting for them to become a 9 and 10. And some days they are. And they slip back to a 6. Some days they're a 7. And there's various reasons why people are 7 and 8. And it's not because they're crap at their job. It's because they're in the wrong job, with the wrong team, doing the wrong thing. I have often seen a 7 and 8 and actually moved them to a different department or a different role, and they become 9s and 10s. But that's not always the case. And sometimes the hardest people to fire are the 7 and 8. So how do you do it? Well, I think first of all, you put proper structure in place to identify what is success for that employee. You want to understand how they work, what's going on in their lives. Instead of walking into the room and saying you haven't performed, you walk into the room and you say, how can I help you perform? There's things that you can do as a leader to check whether or not that person can get better at their job and there's anything you can do to support them. But learn the 7 and 8 rule. And I have seen this. I have kept 7 and 8s in my companies in the past, and the 9s and 10s leave. Someone can surf, get away with it, and no repercussions, and why would a 9 and 10 stay? Why would a 9 and 10 stay a 9 and 10? If they can get lazy and not work as hard, or cut corners and not get fired, then you're going to have a problem. 9 and 10 will not stay in your business, and you'll have a company full of 7 and 8s. And 7 and 8s are hard to manage, take up nearly all of the conversation, any conversation. You have to learn to grow a pair, fire these people. And you know what? When you do, happens many times, they're grateful. Because those 7 and 8s, if you fire them, can often go on to find a job they like, where they are a 9 and 10 and are appreciated. It's your responsibility to fire them. So how can you identify if someone is a 7 and 8? Well, the rule I have is how many times a day are you talking about them? If they come up too much in any conversation amongst your team members, eventual customers, more than once or twice in a week, you've probably got a problem. Second thing is, you often are running a system in your brain where you are fearful of not finding a replacement. So you don't want to fire them because they're better than nobody. And I've done this myself many times. A 7 and 8 is at least a pair of hands helping you. And you're getting sometimes that's your lead. The idea of having to find someone is painful. So you need to get strong. You need to realise and then you need to line up your next hire before you fire. Now, I promise you that employee, and I would be the same, is also looking for another job. So what you can do is help them find that other job. I have done this many times. I've gone to someone who's a 7 and 8 and said, you're not happy, I don't think, you're not completely doing the job the way you should. I've helped you get an interview at this other company. It has actually built relationships with people that weren't happy with the company, but are now my outside of work. You can help that person, even though it might be frustrating that in your company and not performing. The best thing you can do is work out a solution for them and for you. And build a great relationship with that person. Know that it's a great relationship in the company right now by helping them move on. So, following the rule, identify 7 and 8. Be honest with yourself. Do not have fear that you cannot replace them and find that you will. Help that 7 and 8 find a new job and always be honest with 7 and 8 how you're feeling. It will be better for you and for them. And there is a chance, and it's happened a few times in that person becomes a 9 and 10, and it can often be when you give them equity. Let's talk about how to go global. Why is going global one of my main points? It's because a lot of people don't realise that they can go global. A lot of people don't realise that they'll probably remove a lot of the risk in their business if they do go global. Why? Well, if you're in more than one market and the market you're in is in trouble, you spread your risk. I've had this happen to me many times. In my early career with Fluid, we were just in Hong Kong, and it was risky. Hong Kong had a lot of ups and downs. And when we had the downs, I was subject completely to that down. I had no counterbalance with a business potentially in another market doing well. And going global, it turns out, is not difficult anymore. Often, people don't realise that there are a few steps to how your business will go global when you didn't think it was even possible. So what are those steps? First, identify whether there's an opportunity for your product or your service in another market. Research. And even if you don't want to open up that second office or sell that product in that market, once you understand what markets where this could work are, there's a couple of opportunities for you. Now, I can reverse back to raising money. If you're able to say to someone that you could open up your products in other markets with their, it can make an investor happy. One example, make an investor actually go ahead and invest in you. Equally, like I mentioned earlier as well, a brand wants to sponsor you to open up this. This can be a way for you to grow your business and reduce your risk under the dime of a brand partnership. Research is key at this stage. Find out where your product could be sold, even if you don't want to do the work to do it. Second, you can basically set up models like franchising. So if you don't want to set up that business in another market, you can set up a brand franchising arrangement. So someone else will open it up and someone else will do the work, but you can make money by doing nothing. I hate passive income. I don't think that exists, but this is the closest thing to it, in my opinion. Someone else running your brand in another market under a license. So I think that franchising is a real opportunity, and it's a bit of a misunderstood word, franchising, because a lot of people kind of think of like Subway or McDonald's, but franchising can apply to a service business. And many companies are built on partnerships under a franchise. The other thing that's really important about going global is making sure your business is ahead of the time. And if you have a that is thinking globally, ironically, you're more likely to survive in the long term. You'll learn an important lesson. It's easier to run a big company than a small company. Far too many entrepreneur points in my career have made my business too small that I am the only one that can run it. I can't afford senior management. I can't afford to get help. I can't afford to actually stop working for a week. I'm telling you now, by thinking global, you give yourself a chance to grow a big business, and it's easier than having a small business, despite what you've been told by other people. Get a big business if you can. Now, it does link back to what your mission in life is. Maybe you don't want a big business, but do not decide to not have a big business because you think it's easier to have a small business. It's not. Small is not easier. I have run small businesses and I had an easier life once I've made the business big. So do not trap yourself in any market. Do not subject yourself to any market that could disrupt your business, and make sure you always give yourself the chance to be free of your very own business, not trapping you. How to get a mentor. This is the single biggest question I ever get asked, and it's so simple to answer. No one seems going to try anyway. If you want a mentor in your business, I totally understand why that sounds cool. But the reality is, people have built businesses around this concept that you need a mentor, and they've sold you it as the solution. It isn't. What you actually need is not a mentor. What you need in reality is someone who can answer the questions that you have, and perhaps even the answers to questions you didn't know to ask. And this can all be done without a mentor. In fact, I would argue, if you got me as your mentor, it would be pretty annoying, because a mentor will tell you their experience, but it might not be relevant to your life. This video today, in a way, is all the knowledge I have anyway. So of course, you can still have me as your mentor, but what you're really saying, if you're honest about it, is you're looking for a coach. You're looking for someone to keep you accountable. And you can actually break down what that means into what you really need. If you want someone to work with you in your business and keep you accountable, get a coach. If you want someone to help you with sales, hire a salesperson. If you know the question you want to ask, then ask it. Now, I say all that, I still want to deliver on a promise to help you get a mentor. And this is how you get a mentor. Number one, you research what matters to that person. Someone reached out to me yesterday to be their mentor for a property development business they want to run. Do you not know who I am? I hate the property industry, everything it stands for. I think property should be human rights, and the present buy-to-let system has screwed the world up. I don't want to help someone do that. Now, they were very nice and very polite. I won't name who they are, but I'm telling you right now, do your research before you ask them. Of course, I'm not going to reply to that. If I did reply saying no, I'm saying that most people won't reply. You don't want to ask someone to be your mentor, not done the research on them. The second thing is, don't just say, please be my mentor. Now, there are plenty of people that don't take my view that you don't need a mentor and do want to mentor, and they will mentor you. Some will charge, some won't. I'll get onto that in a minute. But when you ask someone to mentor you, remember, it's a bit like saying, would you like to get a mentor? You need to define what it means. So define what you mean when you say, will you be my mentor? Tell people what it means for you. I would like 10 minutes of your time once a week. And perhaps consider, if you do start defining what it is, what sort of questions you're going to ask. And often, if you ask a question, you will get a mentor. If you ask for a mentor, you'll get no reply at all, because no one can commit to an open-ended question, especially from a stranger, asking for mentorship. In an ideal world, I suggest question first. That's actually why I built help.com. So you can go and write a question to 105,000 potential mentors. Now, if after all you're still set on getting a mentor, another way to get a mentor is change the word mentor to advisor. And when you're looking to build a company, for example, and maybe you want to help you build a company that has specific knowledge that you're after, and ask advisory board. Now, advisory boards are a little bit to people. A mentor isn't something you see on LinkedIn profile, but advisor to this company, advisor to that company often is. So as advisory. Now, if you've got business with purpose and you've followed the other things that I've said in this long video today, you'll know how important things like process and systems and structure and goal lead you to what type of advisor you need. And it's much easier to get an advisor mentor, and much easier to structure what the relationship is like. They're, for example, one of your board or advisors, they probably have equity in your business. So you're no longer asking someone to hang out with you and give you a bit of advice and motivate you. You're asking someone to give you specific knowledge around something they love and believe in, and it's much, much easier. The next thing you can do to help yourself get a mentor is connect to the people that they are connected to. So referrals are the best way to get help. Many times, someone I know for a long time that's helped me out has asked me to mentor someone to help them out, and I have done it without question. And so that referral, a bit like in sales and the other things of today, referrals are so powerful. Try to get someone to refer you to the mentor that you want. It's also much easier for someone to say yes when they've got some reference point of someone that knows you. Now, be careful, don't go become friends with someone just to get them to refer you. It'll be transparent and actually hurt you. So do it genuinely, but if you can get a referral for the mentor that you need, it's very powerful. Now, the final way to get a mentor, if that's what you want, the best way is to give value to the person you want as a mentor. Some of the people I've helped in my past have helped me first. I asked them to, so for example, someone redesigned a website for me and made my website better. Of course, after someone's gone and made all that effort to support me and help me, I'm going to give time. And I think that time in the early days allows us to work together to define the questions they're asking and define the things that a person actually needs. And so go and give value to the person that you want as your mentor. Don't just ask them for something, try to bring them something, and it will make a huge difference. And I think that that's one of the things that people never do. They just want to extract value. And this goes back to my personal philosophy in life. It's not give and take, it's give without take. If you follow give without take when trying to get a mentor, if you follow give without take when trying to get a mentor, I'm pretty sure you'll get that mentor. So don't expect anything. Don't expect that person to become your mentor. Give them value, give them respect. Clearly you respect them, you want them to be your mentor. Make the effort, and over time it will come back to you, even if it isn't in that person becoming your mentor. How equity works. This is such an important subject. If you don't get the equity structure right in your business, you will fail. I have been involved in many businesses that didn't do this right and collapsed, not because they weren't good businesses, but because they didn't know how the structure of equity works. Now, just before I get into the detail of how to structure your equity structure in the future correctly, I will make sure you understand one important point. Most people don't want to drop below 50% equity in a company because they think it means they lose control. That's not true. You are able to control your company under the operational agreement. Now, in each country, US, Britain, different markets, you'll have different terminology for this. But you control your company by the shareholder agreement. You don't control your company by the amount of equity that you hold. So if, for example, you have a 50-50 equity split with someone, you are actually potentially in joint control as far as equity is concerned, but you can still allocate one person to make all the decisions and have actual control. So do make sure that you understand that equity ownership does not equal control, right? It does not equal control. Keep an eye on this mindset, because you will often make big mistakes around equity ownership, thinking it means you lose control if you drop below 50%, and that is not true. The second thing to keep in mind with equity is understanding where you're going with the business. Everything I've already discussed in this video is interlinked, but if you don't know where you're going, you don't know how much equity you need to get there. Too many people sell a large chunk of equity at the early stages of their business, only to realize later in their business they don't have enough equity to get to the finish line. If your model is like tech company models and you intend to raise a lot of money, you have to be very cautious of the equity in the early days. Now, there are all sorts of graphs and information on the internet that will explain to you this point. I'm highlighting it to you so you can go and research it. It's a very deep subject, but do not sell too much equity at the beginning. Having said that, the best thing you can ever do is sell no equity at all. I know it's cool to raise money, I know it, but it's cooler to run a business where you don't raise money. A bootstrap business, in my opinion, is healthier. You can retain 100% control and 100% own equity. It's always probably going to be better. Now, there's a lot of exceptions to that question, and one of them I would say is make sure you don't make this one big mistake I see a lot of people make. I have seen people start businesses, and when they start businesses with a partner, they do 52%, 48%. And often for no other reason than the person who came up with the idea believes that he deserved 2% more. This has happened time and time again. It's a huge mistake. I've seen them sue 2 years later between those two people because they didn't just do it 50-50. Do not assume, again, control 52% means anything. If anything, it's detrimental. So if you have a co-founder, my instant recommendation is you do 50-50. Do not belittle the other partner by giving them less. They will instantly, psychologically think they will do 48% of the work, you will do 52% of the work. It does not bode well in the long term. Now, there is a danger with 50-50. That danger is decision lock. If you're making one decision and your partner's making the other, and you haven't put a shareholder agreement in place to decide who has the deciding vote, you have a problem. So the way around this is to have a third party help you make big decisions. Someone you both trust, ideally, but you create a 50-50 ownership structure with a board of advisors, for example. And this allows you to make decisions, especially difficult decisions, without major argument and avoid conflict with your partner. Now, the best way to avoid conflict and avoid even needing to turn to your board of advisors is to be very clear about where you're both going. And I'm using it at the moment in this equity example, 50-50 partnership. It could equally be a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. I'm just using this as an example. That you all know where you're going. I have seen problems in a business, for example, where someone is building a business, money's coming in, one person wants to take and put it in their pocket as profit, the other person into the business to help it grow. One person wants to in one market, the UK, another person wants to expand to the US. You need to try and work out all of this stuff, ideally before you even start the company, within your mind map that I taught you earlier, you figure out where you're going and why. And therefore, you avoid conflict when it comes to major decision making later. Again, I have seen companies fall apart because one person wanted to take the money out and one person didn't. And literally, the business collapses because the two don't agree, don't get along, the business fails. Equity ownership, under this system I'm now teaching you, is not about control, as I mentioned, but it is about understanding what the equity is there to do. Now, depending on your structure, if you're a charity, this won't matter so much. But if you're a limited company that's looking to raise money, please make sure your cap table has the right people on it. I have seen many people not get investment because they gave 2% to the wrong person that the other investors don't want associated with. Equity ownership will tarnish your reputation. Understand how equity is structured. It's showing who is involved in the company. So you need to make sure that you align your branding earlier, to the equity ownership. And whoever owns that company, whoever owns a part of your company, will affect the brand image. So make sure that you're aligning your brand values with your equity ownership. Now, there is a lot of talk by me and anyone that actually knows what they're doing in business about giving equity to your staff. I really believe in this. Now, there's a couple of ways to do it. I honestly think if you want to build a business that scales, you have to give equity to your people. But there's two types of equity structure. Share options, which technically isn't actually equity. It's a percentage in the future of the company, but it can often be in what are framed as earnouts. or there's straight up equity. Now there is a hybrid in this model, and I don't want to get too technical now because I'm actually not a lawyer, but I want you to understand the difference. Most of the time, people are buying stocks and shares in the stock market. They have share options, which means that yes, they'll get given shares, but those shares have no class level, so they have no decision-making power. So you can own shares in the company in the stock market but have no influence over that business or no control. But that is one way to incentivize people. You give them share options. My preferred method, and everyone on my team has this, actual physical equity in the company. Not share options via the stock market listing, but real life equity in the company. So if the company was sold today, they would get paid out. Whereas often with share options, it's some link to the stock market listing, or in some cases, if it's already listed, to you selling the shares on the stock market. But if the company decided to take the company off the stock market, whatever that price was, you'd have to sell it. Again, there's some legal obligations around this. It has to be more than 70% of the shareholders agree. But the point is, I have owned shares in the stock market of a company that I believed in, and then the owners of that company, actual equity owners of that company, decided to take the company off the stock market. I had no choice but to sell my shares. That company delisted, became worth $1 billion, and I could have owned it, but I wasn't allowed because I only owned the share option side, the stock market side, not actual physical equity in the actual company. And I think it's important, if you're even thinking investing in a company, to understand the difference. Of course, if you're going to work in a company, understand the difference. And if you're building a company, understand the difference. You're going to have a major problem in the future. Now, this subject of share ownership, understanding the different classes, please spend time understanding the different classes. Go Google how it works. Go Google share options. Go Google stock market shares. Go Google ownership. This stuff is complex. It's going to be too long. I'm not legal either to go through all of you now, but this structure of share ownership can make or break a company. I would also finally say to you, depending on what your end goal is how you should reverse engineer your share equity ownership. If you are looking to IPO your business, then you want to make sure that the IPO process is fully understood, of course, but your stock is reversed backwards. So when you start the business and you're looking to list it one day, you need to know that when you're starting the business, ideally. Because if you don't structure it early on to eventually get listed, it probably won't. Now, I learned this the hard way with a few businesses that I was involved in. The share structure was so complicated, we couldn't get all the shareholders to agree to even do an IPO. Some shareholders wanted to keep it private, other shareholders wanted to do an IPO, and it gets so messy because they didn't know where they were going in the early days. So learn to structure what I call reverse engineering. Know what your end goal is and reverse the share equity structure from day one on that premise. Now there's one final thing I'll teach you about equity. Sometimes it's hard to determine the value of your company to sell equity. So one thing you should look into and perhaps use is products like a safe. Now, platforms like Y Combinator, one of the famous accelerators out there that help businesses grow, use a safe to help determine a business and its long-term potential for value. There's many different ways to structure a safe, but the beautiful thing about that model, and go and Google it, is you don't need to determine the value of your business now. Someone can invest in your business on a discount of the value in the future. Now again, there's many different ways to structure that concept, but the concept of safe I have found to be very useful, especially in the early days of building a business, to take away the conversation about what is your business worth and move towards invest in this business and this is what we're going to do. It's much easier to get an investor, for example. Frankly, it's much easier to incentivize your employees with it. You're not determining a value on the stock share now, so it doesn't cause tax implications as well. I really think it's useful and not many people know about it. So I hope this overview on equity gives you a good understanding of how it works. I am going to do a whole video on this, much more detailed. I'm going to get some lawyers involved too to show you the different agreements and how it works. But if you go do a little bit of Googling, you'll get most of the information you need that I haven't provided here. And if you have any questions about equity, feel free to drop them in the comments. How to sell your business, how to exit a company. I have done it a few times in my life. There's loads of different ways to do it. I'm going to share with you how to exit your business. Ultimately, selling a company is often a dream of a lot of entrepreneurs. I have done it a few times. I've done it a few different ways, and I've got some interesting insights to share with you. And one of the things I start off by saying, if you really want to sell your company, the best way to sell your company is not want to sell it at all. The most amount of money I ever got for a company was because I didn't want to sell it. That's the strongest place to negotiate from. So the number one thing I'm going to tell you, in an ironic twist, when coming to sell your company, the best thing you can do is build a business you love, and selling it will accidentally happen. This has happened over and over again. History always repeats itself. Mark Zuckerberg was offered $1 billion by Yahoo to sell his company, and he said no. So now it's worth $1 trillion. And I think there's something really powerful in this process. It's kind of sales, like I was teaching you earlier. It's kind of sales. If you don't want to sell it, it means you can get the most for it. And it's a very hard thing to actually be truly not interested in selling it. It is actually your goal, but it will ensure you get the maximum value out of a business if you do it this way. The other way to think about selling your business, and the way I've sold my last company, is I partnered up with a company that could buy my business. So Fluid partnered up with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we worked on a project together. And in that process of working on a project together, PwC realized that they should just buy us. Now, at the time when it was first mentioned, I didn't want to sell. Great negotiating first step. But in the end, I did sell it. And I'll tell you all about that process in a minute. But I'm trying to highlight that another way to sell your business is partnership. Work with the company that is likely to want to buy your business. Build the relationship up, and you'll be surprised how that can lead to an exit. Again, don't lean into it wanting an exit. Lean into it wanting to build a partnership that works for both parties. But it can be a great way to sell your business. The third way is to work with agents that actually sell businesses. And there are a few. I'm not going to recommend any because this isn't a sponsored video by them, but you can Google them. There are many companies that do it. Sometimes it can be quite useful to get one of these companies to do it because, of course, if you're busy trying to sell your business, you're not busy growing your business. But I honestly feel like that these days, these agents, there's a lot of them, and they all have their own different agendas. So just make sure you do your due diligence, ask the previous company that they work with what they were like, make sure that the legal structure is very clear because you don't want to get conned by these companies when you come to the exit actual fee. The fourth way to sell your business is more a merger. So your competitor is a way to exit. And it might seem odd, you've probably spent 10 years hating your competitor. I spent most of my early career making friends with my competitor. I originally thought I was going to sell Fluid to Ogilvy. I made a lot of friends at Ogilvy. I used to sit next to them at the awards dinner on purpose to connect to them. I did projects with them. I thought they were going to be the exit, but they weren't. And so I think mergers, however, are very common, and two businesses coming together is the easiest, that do the same thing is often the easiest way to sell a business. And I will, however, caveat it with, most of the time you don't get the most value. So I sold my company Fluid to PwC. PwC are an accounts business. They're not a creative agency. So they saw more value in us than if I'd merged with Ogilvy that think they can do what we do. So sometimes selling to a non-competitor is more valuable. But if you want an easy sell, mergers are often the way it works. And it's not always true that you don't get the true total value. I've just from experience learned that sometimes selling outside the industry, like I did with Fluid to PwC, can lead to more money than selling to someone in the industry like Ogilvy. But that doesn't mean it's always true. And finally, if you want to sell your business, one of the things that you can also think about is allowing the management in your company to buy it. So I have also done this. Let the leadership team at Nest buy that business. And ways to structure a buyout over time, percentage of profit, but in the end, it can be a really good way allowing you to sell your business without that business getting hurt, and by also giving the people who worked in the company a chance to really step up and own what they've been building with you. I personally really was happy to sell Nest to my team, and I think it's a really powerful way of building an exit strategy for yourself, while at the same time giving the people that run it the love and success that they deserve. So they're the main ways. Now I will add that when it comes to selling a business, the key thing, like anything, at the beginning when you're building the business, never ever pitch to an investor or yourself that you're building a company to sell it. And in fact, I would argue if you're building a company to sell it, and I've seen this many times, be careful, you might end up getting stuck with a business you don't love. Do not build a business to sell it. Do not pitch to investors that you're going to sell it. Build a business you love. Investors want to invest in that. Build a business you never want to sell. People want to buy a business like that. That's the key to being successful in my opinion. Do not build something you don't love. Do not build something that doesn't have purpose. If you got value from this video, I'd really appreciate it by you asking a comment down below or even telling me what I've missed out in this video that you want in the future so I can make it for you. And don't forget, we're following people's dreams every single week on this channel. If you want to hear what happens to the people we help, hit that alarm button so you get the latest update as soon as the upload button is hit. Good luck, everybody. Goodbye. I'm going to eat chicken now. See ya.
Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. My guest today is David Goggins. David Goggins is a retired Navy SEAL who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's also a highly accomplished ultramarathon runner. For those of you that don't know, ultramarathons are distances longer than 26 miles, and in David's case, often longer than 200 miles. For his achievements in athletics, he has been inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame. He also held a Guinness World Record for the most pull-ups completed in 24 hours. I should mention that not only was David a decorated Navy SEAL, but he also graduated from Army Ranger School. David is also a highly successful writer, having authored 2 books, the first entitled Can't Hurt Me, and the second entitled Never Finished, both of which are bestsellers. David's books cover many topics, including his autobiographical description of what can only be described as an incredibly challenging child and young adulthood. His home was abusive, his school environment was abusive, he essentially had no positive resources directed his way. And in his 20s, he found himself to be obese, that is more than 300 pounds, working a job he despised for minimal pay. And it was at that point that David began an inner dialogue that forced him to explore the demons born out of his childhood, but also the position that he found himself in as a young man. And then began the journey to navigate that dialogue and transform himself into the Navy SEAL, the ultramarathon runner, the best-selling author, and the extraordinarily positive and influential man that he is today. As some of you may know, David has done various public lectures. He's a familiar face online because there are so many clips of him on YouTube, and he has done podcasts before. However, I'm certain that you'll find today's discussion to be very different than previous podcasts that David has been featured on. The reason is that, of course, we get into his accomplishments. We talk about the mindset that allowed him to achieve those things. But today, David really lets us under the hood. He lets us into the form of inner dialogue that he has to embrace, that he has to grapple with on a daily basis, multiple times throughout the day and night, in order to impose the sort of self-discipline that he is so well known for. We also get into some of the scientific mechanisms underlying willpower, and we talk about David's current endeavors that include, for instance, his own exploration of science and medicine, for which he has become an intense scholar and practitioner. I should mention that multiple times throughout today's discussion, you will hear curse words. Now, David and I both acknowledge that cursing isn't for everybody, and that cursing itself is different than cursing at somebody. Nonetheless, we do realize that many people, parents perhaps especially, might want to hear cursing. If you don't want to hear cursing, well then this podcast episode is probably not for you. However, if you are comfortable with cursing or if you can tolerate it, I assure you today's discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desired effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. In keeping with that theme, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. Our first sponsor is Maui Nui Venison. Maui Nui Venison is the most nutrient-dense and delicious red meat available. I've spoken before on this podcast. There's general consensus that most people should strive to consume approximately 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now, when one strives to do that, it's important to maximize the quality of that protein intake to the calorie ratio, because you don't want to consume an excess of calories when trying to get that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Maui Nui venison has an extremely high quality protein to calorie ratio, so it makes getting that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight extremely easy. It's also delicious. Personally, I like ground venison. I also like the venison steaks. And then for convenience, when I'm on the road, I like the jerky. The jerky is a very high protein to calorie ratio, so it has as much as 10 grams of protein per jerky stick, and it has something like only like 55 calories. So again, making it very easy to get enough protein without consuming excess calories. If you would like to try Maui Nui venison, you can go to mauinuivenison.com/Huberman. Get 20% off your first order. Again, that's mauinuivenison.com/Huberman to get 20% off. Today's episode is also brought to us by AeroPress. AeroPress is similar to a French press for making coffee, but is in fact a much better way to make coffee. I first learned about AeroPress well over 10 years ago, and I've been using one ever since. AeroPress was developed by Alan Adler, who was an engineer at Stanford, and I knew of Alan because he had also built the so-called aerobic frisbee, which I believe at one time, perhaps still now, held the Guinness Book of World Records for furthest thrown object. And I used to see Alan, believe it or not, at parks around Palo Alto, taking out different aerobic frisbees. So he was sort of famous in our community for developing these different feats of engineering that turned into commercial products. Now, I love coffee. I'm somebody that drinks coffee nearly every day, usually about 90 to 120 minutes after I wake up in the morning, although not always. Sometimes if I'm going to exercise, I'll drink coffee first thing in the morning. But I love, love, love coffee. And what I've personally found is that by using the AeroPress, I can make the best possible tasting cup of coffee. I don't know what exactly it is in the AeroPress that allows the same bean to be prepared into a cup of coffee that tastes that much better as compared to any other form of brewing that coffee, even the traditional French press. The AeroPress is extremely easy to use, and it's extremely compact. In fact, I take it with me whenever I travel, and I use it on the road in hotels, even on planes. I'll just ask for some hot water, and I'll brew my coffee or tea right there on the plane. If you'd like to try AeroPress, you can go to aeropress.com/Huberman. That's AeroPress.com/Huberman to get 20% off any AeroPress coffee maker. AeroPress ships anywhere in the USA, Canada, and over 60 other countries around the world. Again, that's aeropress.com/Huberman to get 20% off. Today's episode is also brought to us by 8 Sleep. 8 Sleep makes smart mattress covers with cooling, heating, and sleep tracking capacity. I've spoken many times before on this podcast about the fact that sleep is the foundation of mental health, physical health, and performance. Now, a key component of getting a great night's sleep is that in order to fall and stay deeply asleep, your body temperature actually has to drop by about 1 to 3 degrees. And in order to wake up feeling refreshed and energized, your body temperature actually has to increase by about 1 to 3 degrees. One of the best ways to make sure that those temperature changes occur at the appropriate times, at the beginning and throughout, and at the end of your night when you wake up, is to control the temperature of your sleeping environment. And that's what 8 Sleep allows you to do. It allows you to program the temperature of your mattress and sleeping environment such that you fall and stay deeply asleep easily and wake up each morning feeling refreshed and energized. I've been sleeping on an 8 Sleep mattress cover for almost 3 years now, and it has dramatically improved the quality of my sleep. If you'd like to try 8 Sleep, you can go to 8sleep.com/Huberman to get $150 off their Pod 3 mattress cover. 8 Sleep currently ships in the USA, Canada, UK, select countries in the EU, and Australia. Again, that's 8sleep.com/Huberman. And now for my discussion with David Goggins. David Goggins, welcome.
Oh man, good to see you again.
Great to see you. It was late 2016, early 2017, I believe, when you were in my lab at Stanford.
Yes, sir.
We did a little work later that day down in San Jose, and gosh, see you everywhere, but it's not enough. So great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on, bro.
You embody discipline and doing hard things.
Right.
I think just start right off with
Just go there.
the bold truth. But right before we went hot mics,
Right.
we were talking about learning.
Right.
Right now, you're spending some time learning and doing things that I think most people probably don't typically associate David Goggins with.
Right.
Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, most people just look at me as the guy that runs and yells as he's running. And that's, while I do that, to motivate people, but people don't understand that my day is broken up into segments. I work out, I eat, I sleep, but I spend most of my time studying. So like, I'm in the medical world. I'm a paramedic in Canada, but I spend a lot of my time trying to nuke every single thing about it, because I'm not trying to just be a paramedic. Learn about veins and arteries and how the heart pumps and stuff like that. I'm trying to learn to the point where I can save someone's life. And even though paramedics are doing that all over the world, I'm trying to be that paramedic that can really dissect exactly what's going on and figure out, what medication goes where. Just trying to learn, the algorithm of what's going on, man. So I spend a lot of time with it.
I love the word algorithm, because when I teach biology or try and learn anything that's related to biology, and especially the human body, I need to know the nouns.
Yep.
But it's the verbs that matter, and that's what you're talking about. Like just saying that sits there, that brain part there, doesn't tell you how it all works.
Oh.
So what does your process for studying look like? Like if we dropped a camera in the room, but a microphone into your inner dialogue.
Right.
Gosh, wouldn't we all love that? But if we dropped a microphone into your inner dialogue, are you waking up looking at the books and going, yeah, fresh day, learn? Or is some of the same resistance that you've talked about coming up around physical work, is that coming up from time to time?
You know what? I was nervous at first. I'm gonna keep I'm gonna keep it real. I'm gonna keep it real. So, I'm not a real smart guy. And what I mean by that is I was born with ADD, ADHD. My brain cannot retain information. I'm not some genetic freak when it comes to running, when it comes to lifting weights. I am absolutely the bottom of the barrel. And people will never believe me. And they can just, whatever you want to believe. So when you ask me this question about what does studying look like for me, I have to go over the same page over and over and over and over again. While Jennifer looked at that page, while she's, quizzing me, she'll learn it right then as she doesn't know anything about it. She will quiz herself or quiz me and learn it as she's quizzing me. It's the most frustrating thing in the world how my brain works. So what I do is I literally sit there with a pen and paper, and I have my books, and I go through and have to write everything down every single day. I will study the same page until it's photographic memory from writing the same thing down. And then from there, I'll go back through and relearn again. So I'll learn the bulk of it, but then I'll go through and learn the small things within that. So if it's a medication, I'll learn what the medication does. I'll learn how to even say the medication. Because these medications aren't like albuterol. No, it's very big words. I'll go through, learn how to say the name. Then I'll go through, learn what the dose is. Then I'll go through, and this is like every single day. So not like, oh, I got it. Let's just go through. No, nothing is I got it. Every single thing. So I can't wait to get in this conversation, because everything I do in life, it sucks. Everything I do in life, it sucks. That's why when I was 300 pounds and 24 years old, it wasn't like I had some big epiphany of, let's just go be a Navy SEAL, let's lose some weight. No, I knew my entire life was gonna be a struggle, which is why I just ignored it. And I said, I'm not even trying to jump off into this shit and learn how to read, how to write, how to memorize, how to become something I am not. But through that process, something happened to me. And I realized this is why I feel sorry for no one. In this podcast, they're going to really not like me, because people are going to think that I am maybe lying or maybe fibbing or exaggerating. No, I was the lowest form on earth. No talent, no ability to learn. And I literally know what it is to be rock bottom and to build that up. So that question about learning is a pain in my ass. And I don't have to do it. So think about it. I'm 49 years old and I'm a multi-millionaire. I don't have to do anything. So all I thought about when I was growing up is, man, I can't wait till one day get to the point where I no longer have to do this stuff. But what happens, as I got older, it became a way of living. So how I do every day is how I do every day. It's a discipline, it's a regimen, It was a choice I made. And the choice I made was, what are you willing to sacrifice and what are you willing to give up to find every bit of who you are as a human being? And I was willing to give up everything to do that. So studying is no joke.
I love that you're studying. I recall a few years ago I heard some interview or podcast with you, and you just threw out like, I don't know what I'll do next. Maybe I'll be a scientist. And I went, yeah. I was like, because I know you a bit,
right.
And I see your work out there, but we'd met before, that if you decided that, you were going to do it.
Right.
And learning medicine, which is what you're doing,
right.
Learning human physiology is so detailed.
Very.
And people out there have to understand, when you look at a textbook and you see the veins and the capillaries, different colors, when the body's open, they're not different, right? You know,
right,
they're not.
Right.
So, I mean, some things have color contrast, but it's not like it's all labeled when you pop it open.
Exactly.
And so the process of writing things down by hand is important for you. So you go back and read those notes. Do you think about that stuff on your runs too? Or are you segmenting your day? Like when you're done studying, are you heading out for a run and thinking about other things? Or are you still rehearsing the material in your head?
So when I write it down and I'm actually looking down at the table right now because I'm back to writing. So I'm actually there right now as I'm speaking to you. I write it down in a way that I'm memorizing page 69. So I'm writing it down, so then writing it down and that page sync together in my brain. So I'm looking at the book in my brain right now. So like, that's just how it works for me. And I have to do it over and over again. So that page is stuck in my mind. So I'm literally flipping through pages as I'm taking these tests, and I'm taking these national tests to become a paramedic or become an advanced EMT or whatever. I'm literally, as I'm taking that test, I'm going through and I'm like, and I'm flipping pages in my head of where that page was. And how I do that is just from how I write it and how it's on the page. When I run, I can't recall any of it. I cannot bring any of that because I'm running. How my mind is wired now is that everything I do is what I do. Because the focus it takes for me to, like right now, I'm running. I'm not like a great runner. I'm not like injury free. So like my first 20 minutes of the run, I'm limping. I'm literally limping because I've had several knee surgeries and my body was twisted. And so now it's untwisting. So people look at, oh, it looks like he's limp, like limping when he runs. I am limping when I run. My body's jacked up, so I'm focusing on how to get the best out of a broken body. So everything I do is a total focus on what I'm doing at that point in my life.
So it seems like you've really trained away or somehow gotten away from the ADD that you mentioned. Because what you describe is like a deep trench. It's like a V-shaped trench. I'm imagining like there's a ball bearing and it's like, and it can only go forward in that trench.
Right.
Or back and it goes forward. It's not like sliding around like concave at the bottom.
Right.
Like a tension. So it's like you've trained that up. Is there a similar feeling when you're in the full focus of running versus full focus of studying? Is it kind of feel like, oh yeah, that's the same groove, but different thing? Or is it just completely different world?
It's a completely different world. Like it's just, for me, it's suffering, but it's suffering a whole different way. Like when I was going through school, I'll never forget, I think I was in 3rd grade. And back then, ADD, ADHD wasn't like, here's this medicine, or here's this thing. They want to put you in a special school. Mm-hmm. So for me, I was so far behind in learning that their big thing was, let's just put him in a special school because he'll never learn. And through that process of like, I don't want to be in a special school. I don't want to be treated any differently. It really, like I never took medication. I've never taken medication for this. That's why right now you see me looking right in your eyes. What the hell is human insane right now? And that's why I don't feel bad for people who have ADHD, who have learning disabilities. And some are impossible because you just can't. But a lot of them you can. But people don't want to go through the process of focus, of teaching yourself how to truly focus. This is where my message gets lost. It gets lost because I may say, MF or F, I may be, because that's the passion that comes out of me, because that's it takes everything for me to learn a sentence. So when I speak about David Goggins, I can't speak Goggins in a way that's just calm and cool. Because when I wake up, I know the journey that it takes for me to find my greatness. And it's hard. Nothing is easy. Nothing just like, oh, I wake up and I just do this or I do that, or it just, I watch people every day go through